The Pentagon-trained general had faced enemies abroad, but nothing had prepared her for this. Handcuffed in front of a crowded courtroom for the simple act of speaking her mind, Maria Thompson's pulse raced like a war drum. The metallic bite of the cuffs bit into her wrists, each clang echoing off the polished marble walls like a sentence she hadn't earned. Whispers slithered through the room like snakes coiling around her dignity. Phones lifted, recording, capturing every inch of her humiliation. The officer's smirk cut deeper than any bullet she had ever faced. She could smell disinfectant mingling with polished wood, a faint scent of fear that clung to everyone around her. Her chest tightened, her mind racing through every rule she had followed, every sacrifice she had made. How had it come to this? How could honor and service be dismissed in a single moment? And yet, beneath the shock, a fire ignited, silent, deliberate, unstoppable. She thought of every hour she had spent defending her nation, every challenge she had faced, every battle she had won. This was no ordinary humiliation. This was the beginning of something the world would never forget. The morning sun had barely risen when Maria Thompson walked into her office at the Pentagon. The hallway smelled of coffee, polished floors, and faint traces of paper from old classified files. She moved with precision, her medals neatly pinned, her uniform immaculate. Yet every step felt heavier today, as if the weight of the world, or perhaps the weight of unseen eyes, pressed against her. Maria's team greeted her with nods, some more genuine than others. She knew the subtle glances, the pauses before conversations, the faint hesitations in assigning tasks. Nothing was overt. Just whispers and microaggressions carefully cloaked as professionalism. But she felt it all. The unspoken question hanging in the air. Does a black woman really belong here? "Morning, General," said Captain Harris, a young officer who had been with her through multiple overseas deployments. His tone was steady, but Maria caught the faint worry in his eyes. He had seen her rise, had seen her fight for every inch in a system not built for her. "Everything on track for today's briefing?" She gave a slight nod, forcing a smile. "Yes, Captain. Let's make sure our team is ready. Nothing slips today." As she passed the conference room, she noticed Colonel Whitman leaning against the doorway, coffee in hand, eyes scanning her like a predator sizing up prey. Maria had learned early in her career that some men thrived on subtle intimidation, testing her at every turn. Whitman was one of them. Nothing overt, just the occasional curt remark, the delayed emails, the subtle questioning of her authority. Maria's mind drifted to her earlier deployments in Afghanistan. She remembered standing atop a ridge at dawn, staring at the barren landscape, feeling utterly exposed. Yet in that exposure, she found strength. Every challenge she faced overseas had prepared her for this battlefield, the one with rules unwritten, where the enemy was invisible and bias hid behind smiles and protocol. Her assistant, Lieutenant Morales, entered quietly, holding a folder. "General, there's a message from the Pentagon liaison about today's press conference." Her hands shook slightly as she passed the folder. Maria noticed, but chose to ignore it. She had grown accustomed to small tremors of fear in others. It was part of the terrain she navigated daily. She flipped open the folder, scanning the contents. The briefing was routine, yet a note at the bottom made her pause. "Ensure compliance with officer conduct." A shiver ran down her spine. She had followed every protocol, every rule, yet these words carried an ominous weight. Later, in the cafeteria, she sat alone at a corner table, watching colleagues chat in clusters. The hum of conversation blended with the clatter of trays and chairs. But she felt isolated. It wasn't just the room. It was the system. Every joke that brushed past her, every casual dismissal of her ideas, reinforced the invisible barriers she had been breaking all her life. "Maria?" called a familiar voice. Sergeant Daniels, an ally she had known since basic training, waved her over. His grin was wide, genuine. He had never hesitated to speak up, even in the face of authority. She joined him, grateful for the brief respite from the cold, calculating eyes surrounding her. "Morning, Sergeant," she said, lowering her voice. "I didn't expect to see anyone sane here this early," Daniels chuckled. "Sane? That ship sailed when we realized surviving the military bureaucracy is harder than surviving an ambush overseas." She smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. But even here, amidst familiar camaraderie, the weight of scrutiny lingered. Conversations drifted around them, remarks about deployments, promotions, and trivial achievements. But there was always an undercurrent. She had to prove herself, again and again. A sudden message popped up on her phone. Another officer had forwarded a video clip from a lower-ranking meeting. Maria's eyes widened. It showed her speaking firmly, questioning a directive that seemed misguided. Her words were calm, precise, professional, but the officer in the video had added a caption. "Insubordination?" Her stomach tightened. This was the microaggression that could snowball into disaster. She had faced false accusations before, but never under the public gaze of a recording. The room felt smaller, every shadow sharper, every whisper louder. Later that afternoon, she returned to her office to prepare for the briefing. The walls, lined with accolades and framed photographs of past deployments, seemed to close in. She ran her hands over the medals, each one a testament to battles fought and won. Yet in this moment, they felt like fragile armor against invisible enemies. Her reflection in the office window caught her attention. Maria saw the same determined woman who had climbed ranks against impossible odds. Yet she also saw doubt flickering across her features. Could she truly navigate this new battlefield without being broken by the system that was supposed to honor her service? A knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. Colonel Whitman stepped in, casual but deliberate. "General Thompson, a word," he said, his tone measured, friendly, but edged with something unsaid. Maria felt the familiar tension coil in her chest. "Of course, Colonel. What's on your mind?" He leaned against the doorframe, sipping coffee. "Just a friendly reminder. Protocol is everything. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings today, would we?" His eyes lingered, sharp and calculating. Maria's jaw tightened. The message was clear. One wrong word, one perceived slight, and the humiliation she feared could become reality. Later, in a quiet corner of the briefing room, she confided in Sergeant Daniels. "It's like walking on a wire. One misstep and everything I've earned, gone." Daniels placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've survived worse, Maria, and don't forget, you're not alone. I've got your back." A faint smile broke across her face. "Thank you, Daniels. But somehow I feel like this time it's bigger. Something's brewing." The clock ticked toward the briefing. Maria adjusted her uniform, straightened her medals, and inhaled deeply. Outside, whispers and footsteps echoed, carrying the weight of scrutiny, judgment, and the unseen eyes of history. And as she walked toward the front of the room, she felt it. The subtle shift, the storm waiting just beyond the threshold. A moment of injustice, a spark, a prelude to chaos. Little did she know. One single question, one firm word, one act of speaking her truth would ignite a chain of events that could shake the very foundations of power. The night had fallen, but Maria Thompson's office was still lit, the harsh fluorescent glow reflecting off her medals like shards of light. Outside, the city hummed with distant traffic, a faint reminder of everyday life continuing while her world had tilted. She sat at her desk, reviewing the transcript of the morning briefing, her hands clenching and unclenching. Every word of the officer's report felt like a trap, every phrasing a subtle attempt to undermine her authority. She tapped her pen against the table. a rhythm of impatience and anger. The Pentagon note replayed in her mind. Ensure compliance with officer conduct. Compliance. A word designed to make her question herself, to strip her of agency. But Maria had never been compliant in the face of injustice. Not overseas. Not now. Her phone buzzed. It was Captain Harris. "General, are you okay? Heard what happened today. Meeting at 10. I think it's urgent." Maria exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "I'm fine. For now. But something's brewing, Harris. I can feel it. Can you meet me at the usual spot?" Within 30 minutes, Harris arrived at the secluded strategy room near the Pentagon basement, an overlooked, quiet space used by a few trusted officers. The room smelled faintly of old coffee dust and electronics. The dim light cast long shadows mirroring the tension in the air. "You weren't exaggerating," Harris said, his voice low. "This isn't just a minor reprimand. Someone wants to make an example of you. And it's personal." Maria's eyes narrowed. "Personal? For what?" "I asked a question. I spoke the truth. That's my job." Harris shook his head. "Not anymore. Not in this environment. You know Whitman. He'll escalate this to the brass if he senses hesitation. You have to act carefully, or they'll crush you before anyone knows what's happening." Maria leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Her mind raced through scenarios. Lawsuits? Media exposure? Internal whistleblowing? Each path carried risks, but inaction was impossible. She remembered every unjust command she had followed in the past, every time she had swallowed her pride. Not this time. "I have an idea," she said slowly. "But it has to be precise, measured, invisible to the people who think they control this." Harris raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." They huddled over blueprints of the office, internal communications, and a timeline of events. Every move was plotted with surgical precision. Who could be trusted, who might leak information, and how to leverage her military contacts without alerting the antagonists. The faint hum of the fluorescent light filled the pauses between their whispered dialogue. "You realize this could backfire," Harris said. "If anyone notices, if the wrong email is intercepted, you could be fired, or worse." Maria's jaw tightened. "I know. But doing nothing guarantees defeat. If I wait, Whitman wins. They're trying to rewrite history, to erase me." Hours passed. The strategy room became a war room. Maps of office floors were scattered on. Tables, red pins marking influential officers, and blue ones marking allies. Each move was calculated, every line of communication carefully coded. Maria scribbled notes, her handwriting tense and precise. Her inner thoughts flickered with doubt and fear, but determination burned brighter. By midnight, they were joined by Sergeant Daniels, and later, Lieutenant Morales. Allies who had endured the microaggressions and injustice alongside Maria now lent their insight. Dialogue bounced between them, quick, whispered, sharp. "We need evidence, documentation. Someone on the inside is willing to leak. We can intercept internal memos. Do we trust Harris?" Each question was a test, each answer a gamble. At one point, Daniels slammed a fist on the table. "They think this is about obedience. It's bigger than that. It's about power, about who gets to speak and who gets silenced." Maria nodded, staring at the ceiling. The weight of the challenge was immense, but she drew strength from it. Every injustice she had endured, every battle she had fought abroad and at home, now funneled into a single plan: reveal the truth and reclaim her voice. The team mapped out a multi-stage approach. Gather undeniable evidence of misconduct and racial bias. Identify internal allies and whistleblowers. Time is the exposure to maximize public and institutional impact. Prepare for retaliation, but stay one step ahead. Each step carried risk. Each moment of hesitation could be fatal. But Maria thrived on pressure. She thrived on impossible odds. And tonight, She was alive with the thrill of strategy, the careful orchestration of justice. Around 2 a.m., Harris whispered, "There's one. Wild card. Someone outside the Pentagon, with influence in the media and the military oversight committees. If we can get them involved." Maria leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Then we do it. We pull them in, quietly, carefully. One call, one voice, could turn the tide." The room fell silent for a long moment. Only the hum of the air conditioner and the occasional distant traffic broke the stillness. Maria closed her eyes, thinking of the morning's humiliation, the handcuffs, the whispers, the smirks. Her chest tightened with remembered anger and, then, clarity. "We move at dawn," she said finally. "No hesitation, no mistakes. Every word, every action counts. If we succeed, this goes down in history. If we fail—" She let the pause hang in the air. Everyone in the room understood. Failure was not an option. As they left the strategy room, the city outside still slept, oblivious to the storm about to erupt within its walls. Maria walked past deserted corridors, her reflection in the polished floors showing a woman transformed. She wasn't just planning retaliation, she was preparing to expose an entire system built to silence people like her. Mini cliffhanger number 1. Unknown to Maria, Colonel Whitman had been monitoring her movements via security cameras, noticing her late-night meetings. He furrowed his brow, suspicion flickering in his eyes. Mini cliffhanger number 2. An anonymous tip had reached the Pentagon brass earlier that day, hinting that Maria might be planning unauthorized actions. Timing, exposure, and interpretation could destroy her. Mini cliffhanger number 3. One of Maria's allies, hesitant to fully commit, sent a private message. "Are we sure we can trust Harris?" The doubt cast a shadow on their perfect plan. By sunrise, the team reconvened. Coffee steam mingled with tension. Eyes met, unspoken questions hovered. Who could be trusted? Who would crack under pressure? Who would betray them first? Maria's inner thoughts were razor-sharp. One wrong move and everything would crumble. Yet she smiled faintly. The fire that had been ignited in the courtroom now roared. The humiliation, the injustice, the whispers, they were fuel. And the plan, fragile and dangerous as it was, represented her first real chance at reclaiming agency, dignity, and truth. As the sun rose, shadows shifted. A storm was coming, and Maria Thompson was ready to meet it head-on. The courtroom doors slammed open, a harsh metallic sound that seemed to echo through Maria Thompson's chest. The air was thick with tension, mingled with the faint scent of polished wood, disinfectant, and the nervous energy of the crowd. Cameras flashed like lightning, capturing every detail, every tremor, every heartbeat. Maria entered, her uniform crisp, medals gleaming, every step deliberate. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, journalists, officers, civilians. Some were curious, some judgmental, some openly hostile. And then she saw him, Colonel Whitman, leaning back in his chair with the same smug smirk she had seen countless times. "General Thompson," the judge began, his gavel poised like a weapon, "you stand accused of insubordination." Maria's heart beat faster, but she did not flinch. Every late-night plan, every whispered strategy, every ally she had recruited led to this moment. She remembered the handcuffs, the whispers, the humiliation of that morning. And she thought, no, not today. Whispers erupted through the courtroom. Officers glanced at each other, uncertain, sensing something shifting. Maria took a deep breath, then began speaking, not with anger, but with precise, undeniable authority. "Your Honor, this is not insubordination. It is a matter of truth and accountability," she said, her voice steady, resonant. "I served my country, and I followed every directive within the law. What occurred this morning was a blatant act of racial bias, orchestrated to undermine my service and my voice. Short, sharp gasps punctuated her words. Cameras zoomed in. Whitman's smirk faltered. The judge's hand hovered over the gavel, the tension palpable. At that moment, Harris, Morales, and Daniels discreetly signaled behind the gallery. They had coordinated with a whistleblower inside the Pentagon. A file appeared on a secured screen. Internal memos, emails, and recorded conversations proving a deliberate campaign to discredit Maria. The room fell into stunned silence. Whitman's eyes widened. His fingers trembled as he reached for a phone. He realized, too late, that Maria's plan had anticipated every move. Allies had prepared for media exposure and internal leaks. The courtroom now held evidence no one could ignore. A journalist broke the silence. "General Thompson, this is shocking. Can you confirm the authenticity of these documents?" Maria nodded, her jaw firm. "Every document is verified. What you see is the truth, and the truth cannot be silenced by handcuffs, intimidation, or whispers in the hallway." Whitman's hand hovered over the gavel as he tried to regain control. Would the judge side with Maria or allow Whitman to manipulate the narrative? The judge's eyes scanned the documents, his gavel resting like a fragile line between justice and chaos. This changes everything," he murmured. Then the twist: a high-ranking Pentagon official, previously assumed loyal to Whitman, stepped forward. "I can confirm the documents are authentic," the official declared, "and I fully support General Thompson's actions in exposing this misconduct." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Cameras caught Whitman's face contorting with panic. He whispered urgently into his phone, but Maria's allies had already ensured that internal communications were monitored. Every attempt to manipulate, threaten, or block exposure was neutralized. Whitman suddenly bolted from his seat, trying to flee before public disgrace, but security blocked the exits. The audience held their breath. Maria's voice rang out, unwavering. "The truth does not fear exposure, and justice does not bend to intimidation." The room erupted in a mixture of applause, shocked murmurs, and the click of cameras. Whitman was handcuffed, this time for his own misconduct, and led away, his career crumbling in real time. Just as the tension seemed to peak, a reporter shouted, "General Thompson, is there more?" "Who else is involved?" Maria paused, her eyes scanning the room. Every ally had held their breath, and every officer watched. She smiled faintly, knowing she had only just begun to uncover a system-wide problem. Then came the emotional spike. Maria approached the microphone, her inner thoughts flooding. All those years, all the battles, all the humiliation. It led to this. Not vengeance, but justice. Not only for me, but for everyone silenced before me. She spoke directly to the crowd. "If you have been overlooked, dismissed, or silenced, know this. Courage is deliberate. Truth is resilient. And no system, no matter how entrenched, can erase it." The camera panned over the courtroom. Allies nodded with pride. Journalists scribbled furiously. The public would see this unfold, viral in seconds. The day that began with humiliation ended with a historic reversal. Maria knew the fight was not over. The ripple effect would reach far beyond this courtroom. Policies, careers, and prejudices would be challenged. And somewhere, unseen, others were preparing their own moves, supporters and detractors alike. As the gavel finally fell, not on her but on Whitman, the courtroom exhaled. Maria's chest swelled with relief, triumph, and the quiet knowledge that the most brutal battles are often internal, fought in whispers, strategy rooms, and sleepless nights. The climax closed with cinematic imagery. Maria, stepping into sunlight. Outside the courthouse, medals catching the morning rays, her reflection mirrored in the glass, strong, unbroken, victorious. The injustice that began with handcuffs, whispers, and smirks had ended with exposure, accountability, and a promise. No one's voice could be silenced without consequences. The courtroom emptied slowly, the echo of footsteps bouncing off marble walls like the fading pulse of a battle won. Maria Thompson lingered for a moment, her medals catching the light, a silent testament to the struggle that had carried her here. The air was electric, not with tension this time, but with the quiet, humbling weight of vindication. Outside, cameras captured her every step as she walked through the courthouse plaza. People stopped, some staring in disbelief, others nodding in respect. Whispers of admiration followed her like a tide. The handcuffs that had once bound her wrists now felt like distant memories, relics of an injustice transformed into a lesson in resilience. Colonel Whitman had been escorted away, his career in tatters. Internal investigations were underway, and whispers of systemic reform rippled through Pentagon corridors. Maria's allies, Harris, Daniels, Morales, stood nearby, smiles cautious but proud. Each had risked exposure, career, and reputation to support the truth. Now, that support had been validated in the most dramatic way possible. Sergeant Daniels clapped her on the shoulder. "You did it, General. They won't forget this day." Maria exhaled, a mix of relief and lingering tension. "It's not just about me," she said softly. "It's about everyone who's ever been silenced, overlooked, or dismissed." Her eyes scanned the crowd. Faces reflected hope, admiration, and a newfound belief that courage could indeed challenge injustice. A reporter approached, cautiously. "General Thompson, what's next for you?" She paused, letting the moment linger, letting the weight of the victory sink in. "Next, I continue to serve my country. I continue to speak truth to power, and I make sure no one else suffers in silence like I did." The plaza seemed alive with possibility. Officers she had never met approached her, nodding, shaking hands, some even offering apologies for complicity in a system that had allowed bias to fester. For the first time in years, Maria felt a sense of community, a recognition that justice, however delayed, could prevail. Mini cliffhanger. Even in victory, Maria knew the fight wasn't over. Policies would take time to change, prejudices lingered, and unseen enemies were overseen. But the precedent had been set. Courage had consequences, yes, but it could also command respect and action. Later, in the quiet of her office, Maria reflected. Emails of support poured in from across the military, from civilians, from students inspired by her story. Social media buzzed with clips of her courtroom statement, hashtags spreading her message of accountability and truth. The world had witnessed what she already knew. Dignity, integrity, and bravery could never truly be erased. Lieutenant Morales knocked softly. "General, the team wanted to know. Should we celebrate tonight?" Maria smiled, fatigue softened by triumph. "Yes," she said. "But remember, the work continues. Today we won one battle, but the fight for justice never ends." The city outside continued its rhythm, unaware of how one act of courage had sent shockwaves through an entire institution. Maria Thompson, once handcuffed and humiliated, now walked, free, her dignity intact, her mission clear. And as she looked out the window at the morning sun glinting off the Pentagon's walls, she thought, "This victory isn't mine alone. It belongs to everyone who refuses to be silenced." Maria Thompson stood by the window, sunlight spilling over her medals, the soft hum of the city below a stark contrast to the storm she had endured. She let herself breathe for the first time in what felt like weeks. The courtroom humiliation, the whispers, the handcuffs, they were behind her. Yet the lessons remained, etched deep into her mind. Courage, she realized, is deliberate. It is the quiet decision to speak truth, even when the odds are stacked, when the world seems indifferent, and when every instinct tells you to stay silent. Maria had fought battles overseas, But the hardest battles often occur where you least expect them, within the systems meant to protect you, under the eyes of people who claim authority, yet wield it to intimidate. She thought of the countless individuals who had been silenced, overlooked, or dismissed. Each act of injustice she had endured was not hers alone. It was part of a larger story, a cycle that could only be broken when someone dared to resist. By standing firm, by planning carefully, by trusting the right allies, she had turned humiliation into a spark that could ignite change. Her gaze fell on the Pentagon beyond the glass, a reminder that institutions are powerful, but not invincible. Systems built on tradition, hierarchy, or prejudice could be challenged, exposed, and transformed. One voice, one act of courage, could ripple outward, inspiring others to refuse silence. And that was the universal truth she wanted the world to. See, injustice anywhere demands accountability, and bravery is not measured by absence of fear, but by action despite it. What if this happened in your workplace, school, or neighborhood? What would you do? Would you stay silent? Or would you act with deliberate courage no matter the cost? Maria smiled faintly. Her battle had been personal, but its impact was universal. And in that realization, she understood that victories aren't just about triumph. They are about creating hope, inspiring courage, and proving that truth cannot be silenced. The story ends here, but the conversation begins now. Speak up, act deliberately, and never let injustice stand unchecked.